So I just wanted to reintroduce ourselves as Compassionate Community Care. We wanted to thank you so much for being with us today. And for those of you who participated in our survey, we appreciate your time. We know that some of you spent upwards to half an hour, maybe even an hour or more completing the survey. Some of you spent maybe a shorter period of time, 15, 20 minutes. That was about the average for this survey. And this was something that we took on over the tail end of COVID. And so you'll see in a lot of our responses and in the feedback for the survey, there was a large number of participant responders who said that, COVID played a big role in their lives. And that was featured in the survey as well. So for those of you who are with us today, we thank you for your opportunity to speak with you and examine and officially launch our survey and our survey results. This survey was completed over a span of a few months, and ultimately it is published. It's final. I'm going to share this with you as a document. For those of you who asked for copies, we can email you copies as well in PDF, and we can also send you mail copied as well if you like a copy that's printed. So that's available. And just an outline for today, what we'll go over is who we are, who is Compassionate Community Care, and what do we do? And ultimately, what are some of the, a review of the survey, what were some of the takeaways from this experience? What did people come back and share with us? What was the feedback? What were the messages that people want to share with you? Ultimately, those who are going to get the findings of the survey. What were the methods that we used? Who were the participants, the results? And some of the general highlights, statistics, references, and copies. So if you do require or request a copy, we have two versions. We have a summary, which is a shortened handout. I think it's a little foggy, but I'll change that. And so the survey that we did, we had over 500 participants. And so we decided, because there was such an amount of a volume of research that came back from this and information, we did a shortened summary, which is about 5 pages in length. And we also have a longer summary, which is a report and detailed summary, which is a booklet, and that's 75 pages. So we have 2 versions, okay? So you're aware of, okay? And we've published both now, and they'll be available online as well. And ultimately today, what we'll talk about a little bit is what do the survey findings show us in terms of seniors and elder abuse? Is there elder abuse occurring in our senior populations? How can we prevent it, and how can we ultimately stop it from happening? And what is some of the follow-through opportunities that we see from that? We're going to talk about some of the training seminars that we've had already on elder abuse prevention, and the following ones that are coming up still, because we're starting a series. We also have our community advocacy training seminars and being with visitor training, which we'll highlight as well for those of you who are not familiar. And then finally, we'll have a Q&A and a follow-up and final farewell and thank you. So that's what's in store for us today. Thank you again for joining us. For those of you who do not know us, we're Compassionate Community Care. It's a registered charity comprised of healthcare professionals and volunteers who provide support to vulnerable people and their families during times of illness and crisis. And what we do here is we believe that all human life has equal value and dignity, and that every person deserves to be treated with respect and compassion while receiving the care they need and deserve. So whether you are facing a chronic condition, a disability, or end-of-life situation, we are here to help. And we encourage you to reach out to us. Some of the ways that we help and assist people is concerning finding answers to questions about end-of-life concerns and finding the educational support resources you deserve. We have a helpline. And this helpline is 24 hours, 7 days a week opportunity for you to reach out to us. You can contact us by phone. It's 1-855-675-8749. And this is, for any emergency. It's a crisis situation that someone may find themselves in. We were just on the phone earlier today, and we spoke to a woman who had an issue that arose last year in June. And she says to us, I wish I knew about your service. I wish I knew about your helpline, because exactly what you do and you share with people in the moment of crisis is what compels us to know what to do further and how to act and respond. And if I had known what I know now, I could have acted differently and maybe saved my father's life. So I encourage you to share our information with other people. We often get requests to send our magnets, whichever phone number or helpline number, or even a business card out to people, parishes, churches, different various groups, organizations. And we like to promote that phone number so people know and are aware of it. Because the more people that know about our services and how we can help, the better. We can prevent often very many tragedies from happening. And so if you'd like to contact us on our office line, you are more than welcome to. Our non-helpline contact is here. It's 519-439-6445, and that's a non-emergency number. In terms of the helpline, what we actually do is we provide information, advice, and support in these areas. So we reflect on things when it concerns matters of patient advocacy. There can be issues of conflict resolution, an education issue, for example, someone not knowing what their rights are as a resident in a long-term care facility or even in a home. When it comes to a hospital situation where people don't know what to do and how to respond to issues of power of attorney or treatment options, that can be an issue that we can often speak to as well. Issues related to euthanasia or assisted suicide are often the topics that we most often cover, but there's other issues that fall in between throughout. We offer also training programs and guides for visiting. So you can actually become a visitor and a volunteer coordinator if you decide you'd like to take on a leadership role. These are great opportunities that can manifest in your own community and help open up more doors and opportunities for those around you. And ultimately, we would love to share with you the opportunity that if you are, in fact, looking to build a community in your community, it's a compassionate community care chapter or segment, we would love to hear from you. And so that's something that's been springing up. And there are communities being based out of Ontario, across Canada, and even internationally, where there's hubs that are being located throughout. And people are actually starting to visit in programs and go to their homes of people they know. There could be loved ones. We had a call about a young man who had his father, he's getting older on in his years, and he found that he wants his father to have some support, someone to speak to, and just an open ear. And that's something that we would hope to facilitate too in the near future, that someone calls us from Cambridge, well, then there we go, we can call Patrick and Patrick can go visit them. So it's a great opportunity to share what we do and ultimately grow this group and culture of assisting others in life. And ultimately, what we want to bring is this community of dedicated members, leaders, and volunteers who can go out and speak and help one another. So I'll talk a little bit about that later, but ultimately what I'd like to touch on here now and today is the reason for our call in our group, in our meeting, is the Honoring Our Seniors. This survey is a survey that we completed at the tail end of COVID, and it was in response to how seniors are impacted on a wide base as a population, but also through the COVID pandemic. And so a lot of these answers, what you'll see and find is that people often responded to the survey very positively. We had very close to no negative responses in terms of wanting to complete the survey. Most people were very responsive and affirmed that they wanted to participate. Some were not maybe necessarily able to complete it for whatever reason, but for the most part, people were very positive in wanting to share their opinion and wanting to participate. So what does this ultimately mean to us and why is this important? And we bring this up with myself and others, and especially Alex, when we speak to people about our programs and training, because over the pandemic, we saw that loneliness became a very, very impacted issue that impacted everyone. Ultimately, this was something that affected a lot of people. And I'd be curious if I did a raise of hands survey here on this call, how many of you were impacted in loneliness? And I would say myself included, yes, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And this is something that we found across the board. This is something that even as a person who's married and I have 4 young children, 5 years and younger, we found ourselves being lonely. We found that we were often detached from others around us. And oftentimes this was a case where people wanted to reach out to other people. Some people were not receptive to that necessarily. Others were open to that. And there was some moments where families were in turmoil, and that came out in the survey results. So what we found that loneliness looks very different for many people. And across the board, we saw very diverse, wide array of responses from our senior population. We're going to show, and I'm going to read from our survey results because there's so many. We have a detailed report of over 75 pages. That's what I'm going to be referring to today. But ultimately, it captures, a synopsis of what seniors are going through and what they went through. So for our first group, I just want to bring up this point. Some of the ways that we approach the survey in the background is that we had a wonderful list of people to call and contacts. And we used our team of callers. So just for the methodology, just so you know, a team from JMJ Communications conducted the survey. They gathered responses and seniors were contacted by email, mail, and or phone. And those who responded to the invitation were able to complete the survey by either going themselves online, via survey link and answer the questions themselves, or by telephone while speaking with someone who recorded their answers. The responses were then entered into a confidential database, and the results were synthesized and used to create our final reports. The final reports, I may just repeat here, we have an overview that is 5 pages, that is a short summary, and we can provide this to you as well. And we also have a longer summary, which is a 75-page document. So either of the two will be available, both of them will be available online on our website following today. But if you'd like a copy emailed to you, you can get either version, okay? And also, if you needed a printed copy, we can make those available to you as well. So as an overview of the results, ultimately, there were 2 distinct groups within the study: those who were isolated and did not see their family and friends, and those who acted as if there was no COVID. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Separate from those 2 groups, there was a third smaller group, which was a little bit more fragmented. And those seniors were those who felt isolated to a certain degree, but due to either having a spouse, partner, or someone they lived with, a single person, or a friend that was very dedicated and very involved in their life, or even a pet, that made a big difference for them. And that allowed them to be involved in a community, and they endured fairly well through the lockdowns. While they expressed some feelings of loneliness, it seemed manageable because they were not completely alone. Some of the data I just wanted to summarize here. And as we jump right in, these are some of the questions they had for those who participated. The first off was do they consider themselves a senior? We had a small fragment that said no, but they were of age. So anyone who was considered 55 or over was considered a senior, and was able to participate. Others wanted to participate, but because of age, they were under this age, they were not able to. So we conducted a survey of over 500 Canadians. So we managed to reach that threshold. That was the goal. And of these, 67% said they were female, 33% said they were male. 24% of those surveyed, these are the breakdowns actually of the ages. So if you look on your screen, you'll see that the ages of 55 to 65 were around 17.6%. The next bigger bracket and the largest combined group was 65 to 75 at just under 40%. And then the following group after that was 34%, which is 75 to 85 group. And then the last, which were about 9%, was the 85 plus group. So we did have a nice wide range of respondent seniors. In terms of identity, the people who responded, like I mentioned here, majority there was a larger group that was female, obviously. And then oftentimes we found that people would enroll people they knew. So they would actually refer us to people as well that could participate in the survey. For the question that if a person lived alone or with a spouse in retirement housing or with family members, we found that over 52% lived with a spouse, single person. And then the remaining 24% found they were alone. So we had just almost a quarter of the surveyed seniors respond that they lived alone. And then the rest of that group, the remaining amount, said they lived either in retirement housing, with a child, with a sibling, with another family member, or with other people, individuals. In terms of saying if they lived alone or with others, there was a very wide opportunity to respond. So we do have some notes on the side in the legend, so you can notice those throughout the survey as well. And what we do in the longer survey response, which is this further detailed report, we actually examine those issues and we examine those notes. So that's why this is so much longer, 75 pages in length, because we actually go into detail with some of the responses and what their feedback was. One of the largest invariants, which is a question we asked right off the bat, which is, do you currently rely on anyone or need assistance for any activities such as getting groceries, bathing, laundry, cooking, pharmacy, banking, self-care, paperwork? We found that 85% of responding, surveyed seniors said no, which is actually quite surprising to me in that sense that most people are quite self-sufficient, and that was a good finding. It was very positive. 77.4% said that they found they needed help or assistance in some regard, and the remaining smaller fragment said that they didn't necessarily need help during COVID, but they would ask for, or their children would ask to help them during COVID to get groceries, or for example, use of a scooter, banking, ironing, things like that. So that was an interesting finding. Overall, some of the findings that we found in takeaways was that there were three groups that made up the responding categories. One major group was those who fared well through the COVID pandemic, and those were seniors who continued on with their daily life as usual. They acted no different, they carried on like normal, and they remained socially connected and with others in their community. And this was a very much more, I would say, hopeful, optimistic group. They found that the pandemic wasn't very different for them, and they found that they could express themselves well in their own communities. They had good, strong relationships, and they were able to maintain those relationships throughout the pandemic. The other group that we found, a large subsect, was some seniors felt more isolated than ever before. And these individuals, they expressed feelings of loneliness, isolation, frustration, and depression. They found these were the common experiences amongst the seniors who were socially isolated. They were often withdrawn. And they also found that they felt abandoned. We found that this was a common trend within this group, that they felt they were abandoned or deserted by others as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The third group, for some, they say that they managed through with a single person, a friend, or even a pet. This was actually an interesting finding. I found that they had a single dog or a cat, and that really helped them manage through that pandemic because they had a single person or being in their life. Another group within this category said that their faith or their beliefs made a big difference in their lives through the pandemic. And these seniors managed by having a single person, maybe a spouse or companion, check in on them. Perhaps it was a friend or a visitor, or it was a pet or their own belief system that helped carry them through the pandemic. And so overall, we found that these results were very interesting. There's a lot of feedback, so we're going to go through that with you as well and some of the specific questions, but I'll highlight more of the questions and then the answers as well as we continue today. This survey, ultimately, we found that in summary, and you'll see this at the end in the results, that seniors found that the last few years were extremely isolating. Even if they were in a group that continued on as usual, this was still, there was large numbers of responses that came back saying that it was very isolating. Many felt abandoned or cut off from their communities, faith centers, loved ones, and friends. Those who said they were able to deal remained positive. They did not experience depression or feelings of despair because they remained active, but they had a busy lifestyle with connections, and they met throughout with their family, their loved ones regularly. And this is a takeaway for us, I find, especially within our group and our work, that we can do better as a community, and we should be able to do better, and we need to. So some of the feedback that we obtained was how often, for the question of how often were you contacted by relatives or friends, we saw 45% respond often. So this was actually a good point because people found that they were in touch with people, and some, there was almost, half of the percent of the group was able to remain in some, contact with others. And of this group, there was a small fragment that said that they never were contacted by anyone. There was the occasion, the always group, which was 36.1%, and then the often as well. So there is some contact. And in terms of the feedback, is there anyone you try to avoid calls from or visits? There were some funny answers, of course. As you can imagine, people try to avoid the duct cleaners, the Bell and the Rogers sometimes, which happens. But some people mentioned that they feared anyone who might have COVID. Obviously, certain neighbors. One person mentioned that they had abusive neighbors. And others mentioned there was a lot of spam calls, and that they felt that this was something that, they were trying to avoid calls from. But the majority said no, that there's no one that they felt they needed to avoid. For some of those people who said that their living situation has changed, we asked them this question: how has your living situation changed in the last few years? 84.5% said no. 15% said yes. And for those who said yes, often it was a situation of those who said that they were moved, they were relocating, they were downsizing from a house to an apartment accommodation. They said that their children moved back in, or the spouse passed away. They had either medical or health problems or issues. They found that they needed to take care of family, or they had, for example, an issue with the landlord who raised their rent. and or they had to move into retirement housing. They also said some people mentioned they had to move in with their children or their family. The partner may have moved to a nursing home and or they moved to a city or a rural area, as well as an ex-spouse moved back in. That was some of the feedback from some of those people. And in terms of, there's another question I'm just going to go back to quickly here. If there was anyone who relied on anyone for support, I just wanted to mention this, that most of the responses found that people, like their children, would help them. And some of the children would help, not necessarily now, but during COVID. This was a very prominent trend that children would go pick up groceries for their parents. The person may have needed assistance for banking, cooking, common chores, errands like cooking, cleaning. Oftentimes people said, friends help me get groceries and meals are prepared for me. Another person mentioned a lady who comes in twice a week to help with my husband, so I have 3 to 4 hours on those days to go out and do things. Others said that children-in-law will help with the groceries and their activities. This was a common trend that people would come in and assist where needed. So that was very helpful. And in terms of, for those of them who answered this question, how often did your relatives or friends stop by to check on you? This was oftentimes people who said yes, they mentioned their family and friends were the closest to them. There was a question about medication, and we found just a small difference that if someone mentioned they took medication, that was, around the 66 percentile. So of all those who were responding, 66% said yes to taking medication. And there was a slight difference. It actually went down during COVID. So during COVID, people found that they took less medication, since we found there's 1% increase on when it comes to medication. So 66, yeah, so it was a very close tie. So we didn't include that second point, but just so you know, it's very close in the answers, that medication during and after COVID. In terms of performing daily or weekly exercise, 80% said yes. And this was a beautiful question, and I like hearing from people because there was a wide array of answers. And the exercise I found it's really compelling, because people often came back and said that they exercise either once a day or twice a day. Even some individuals, some people said they were avid golfers and they would golf 3 to 4 times a week. Others found that they were swimming. People would go out and climb stairs, even just during COVID. Others would go out and garden. Some others said that they wanted to go curling, so they would continue doing that. Others had other sports that they performed, baseball, basketball, soccer. And so these were a lot of very active seniors that we had that responded to our survey. So that's great. That was great news. In terms of, were you able to go out for a walk to get some fresh air during COVID? 92% said yes. And what's really beautiful about this is that the responses were very varied. One person said that they would not be able to go out, but of the ones that said they could, some people said they just go out to get air. Others said they don't walk because of bears nearby. Others said they don't go out unless they have to, but they try to get exercise inside their homes. One person said, I stuck out my head, but if during the winter I don't go out. During COVID, no, not really. I became more a stay-at-home person rather than before. So that was this very common trend we saw. A lot of people spoke about becoming a homebody and a person who didn't really want to go out more. So that's where we find a lot of answers were isolating. The experience was isolating for people. Swimming, curling a few times a week. When the weather is warm and sunny, I go out to my power wheelchair as an indication of how often. There's now over 4,200 kilometers on the wheelchair, on the chair's odometer. So significant. Some people found that they had to ignore certain rules, COVID rules. Others said that they were farmers, so they get a lot of exercise. One person said they go to the gym, and others said they can't walk due to use of a cane, or they did not count the times they went out for walks, but they walked very often. But they found that they have become lazy. This has nothing to do with the last 2 years. So some very interesting responses. In terms of how many meals people were eating, we found the majority of people, over 52%, had at least 3 meals a day, which is excellent. 41% said they had anywhere between 2 to 3 meals a day. And then others said, a smaller group said that they had only 1 or 2 meals a day. And of those, in terms of preparations for the meals, the responses were often that they included the person being interviewed, their spouse or their partner, their kids, a cook would come in to cook for them, live-in housekeeper helper, or they had ready-made frozen meals to just heat up for the main meal, and then they would eat snacks throughout the day. Some said that they would order prepared meals or go buy food from the food court, and or their granddaughter or grandson would come. Occasionally, some would pick up takeout or restaurant delivery, and then there was Meals on Wheels, which was a very popular answer, and then care home. Others that said no, they said that the retirement support in their building helps. So they had that as well. In terms of COVID and that changed during COVID, we found that 95% said no. So a few of the remaining fragmented responses came back saying that they did not or could not go out for dinners during COVID. Some responded that they ate less meals. During COVID, the grandchildren would not come. Now they do. The mail service has only been used recently in the past 4 months. And oftentimes we heard people saying that they would cook and freeze their meals and then they would reheat them later. Some mentioned that they don't eat junk food, they eat a balanced diet. So they wanted to share about their eating habits. They often said, some others mentioned that they would leave the food in the basement. Oh, during COVID, they had a service that would leave the food in the basement lobby, so less accessibility. Someone mentioned they started making bread, so they ate more and gained weight. And some also mentioned that, in response to the question about getting groceries, answers included that they drove themselves or that their spouse or their children brought them and dropped them off. They would often order them online and they pick them up curbside or delivery. Some take the taxi, siblings or their stepmother or other family members would help them get their groceries. Others said that their neighbors or friends or volunteers are helped and they would help shop for others. And some other feedback included by doing major shopping once a month as limiting the number of times entering stores. Also, some mentioned that the PSW who comes to look after my husband would give them respite time. And so some of them mentioned all of these kinds of feedback. Has the increased cost of food affected your eating habits? This was a very interesting answer and question. 63% of people said no. 14, just under 15% said yes. And then the remaining amount said not really. And of those responses that came back, many responses included certain points that I wanted to highlight here. Someone mentioned, sometimes I cannot buy the things I once loved because it is so expensive. We're concerned and appalled by it. Extra expenses from grandson who is being paid, they're paying for their schooling, which eat into their savings. Another mentioned it affected how many times I got to the store and how much I let go to waste. They noticed the prices went up, but I still can't get what I need. One person mentioned eat more lentils and less meat. And another individual said that they go to the food bank now. They have never done this before. Some others have mentioned that this is a common trend. They are not eating as many fresh vegetables. One person mentioned they had to borrow money for groceries. Others said they cannot buy as many organic foods as before. And they noticed I watch what I buy and am more careful with purchases. Some mentioned we took more greens and veggies than we used to. In terms of the questions of surrounding, do they require any medical assistance for needs that were not being met? This was a very wide-ranging response and feedback. Oftentimes, we found 81.1% said no, but of the remaining percent that said yes, 8% said yes, but there's a wide variety of answers. And a lot of these answers included feedback about their doctors not being available, only being able to have remote visits and appointments. Some mentioned that the frustration it took to book appointments for blood work, but it took too long and there were protocols that were still in place. Oftentimes people found that their checkups were overdue, for example, for their physical. And others mentioned that they had to drive 6 hours for a medical appointment. So this was one of the larger questions in terms of wide-ranging responses. One person mentioned they had to go to emergency often. Another mentioned that they didn't have a family doctor they can visit, so they had to go into the clinic. Another mentioned that some tests were delayed. One person said the doctor neglected me. They switched me to another doctor. Some of them mentioned that their doctors were closed. One person mentioned that they believe their cancer was diagnosed later than if things were normal. And many mentioned their appointments were canceled, either with their family doctor or their dentist. One mentioned that they said, found it upsetting that it took so long to get an appointment with family doctor, was not able to get a procedure done. Minor surgery was delayed, still has not been done. One person mentioned, I have asthma, it takes too long to see my doctor. And elective surgery was delayed. So that was a common trend. We saw many surgeries, elective surgeries were delayed, waiting lists waited for a year for an appointment, couldn't get seen because of vaccination status, but found another doctor. I have deferred some things that probably should have been looked into. All of my medical needs were being met. I have a surgery and oncology appointments. I have had everything done right away. I'm okay now. And often we've heard of people who said that their regular doctor visits were changed to phone calls or Zoom. And one person mentioned their cancer treatment was not affected as far as they could tell. They were very impressed by the service they received. So that was one example. Okay, and then the question of, do you currently require any medical assistance for any needs that were not being met? 92% said no, and there was a fragmented response as well. Some people responded they needed help with accommodations, mobility issues for their back. One person still said that they cannot find a GP, general practitioner. Another mentioned that they don't have a doctor. Another individual said they need a prescription and waiting for doctors. So there was a lot of feedback for long wait times, issues with doctors, still waiting for elective surgery, and they find it's difficult to get appointments. And other specific training or specialized programs like rehab and occupational therapy for their surgery recovery. In terms of, are there any areas of concern for you? Your health, mental well-being, spiritual life, family relationships, estate planning, finances. This was also a very wide response in terms of the answers. Some of the specific answers were that people were concerned about their health, their family, their finances, especially during COVID. They were concerned that their church was closed. They were concerned with work. Some were looking for jobs. One person mentioned, I'm not making enough money in my business, so my finances are really tight. As I only get CPP and OAS, and it's barely enough for rent. One mentioned that they deal with depression, and that was also another theme that we saw throughout. Often they found that they needed, one person mentioned they have started doing online counseling, and others mentioned trying to keep their family members healthy as well. And that this was another theme that we saw. They were very worried about their country and the direction it is going. Rent is going up, needs to look for another place. Some were worried about their age-related health issues. And when asked to explain, one person said that generally most common answers included concern over their health, specific health issues, chronic health conditions, deteriorating health, family difficulties, health and well-being of their spouse or their children, family and friends. Other family concerns included grief over loss of loved ones and care for spouse if the primary becomes ill, as well as concern for their future. Financial concerns included worry over the economy, inflation, recession, their personal or family finances, having to work to meet expenses, estate planning, launching a new business, etc. Verbatim, some of the interesting feedback that we received was that there was some experience long COVID, and they found that they had specific health conditions that affected them during COVID, and especially after. Some shared concern over MAID, medical assistance in dying and euthanasia. Others mentioned the medical health care system, vaccinations for children, COVID mandates, and COVID vaccine. Some social concerns included lack of hugging and going out with people for lunch or theater. Their concerns for widowed persons to establish new friendships, interests, hobbies, being in touch with others, and not feeling alone or lonely. Another social health concern included being separated from family, not being able to see family relationships and breakdowns over COVID, not being able to help family. They were worried about new family members who had a disability. Worried about a family member with a disability. Such accounts encompass the following. They would like to be in touch with a seniors group near my location so that I could get together and meet with others my own age in my own area. Another person mentioned insufficient contact with grandchildren, used to be with them often, now not as much. Spiritual concerns concluded churches being closed, spiritual well-being impacted due to closures and separation from the faith life. We found people were desiring more of a faith-based community or a family being involved in their spiritual life. or enhancing their own spiritual life. One senior recounted the grounding her faith brings her. I'm fortunate to have an active prayer spiritual life. She mentioned, I'm praying about my frustrations, handing my concerns, and it has been very helpful for my mental health. This was a very common trend, and this is why I bring this up, because oftentimes people want to share about their faith or their spirituality, and so we tried to capture some of those responses in our survey results as well. One person mentioned their concern over the future, and they said, I worry I worry ahead, but I try not to. My husband says to live in the present. I think mental health did suffer during COVID. When you are not in front of people directly, human contact gets lost, so you do not have as much human contact. This has also passed. I worry about the training that medical staff are getting based on the standards of care. People having to pass exams and cannot pass, but how will this affect healthcare? I worry about politicians and making decisions about healthcare that are really crucial. They have to tell the truth. Science matters. Often we found people worrying about this, the trend and the direction the country is going. Some worried about their grandchildren and their grandbabies. Others worried about future and their freedom. There was a concern about the lack of trust of our leaders and the disunity being created amongst our friends. Explained earlier, they said they had tight finances due to lack of regular work. There was combining of answers as well. And if for the question of well-being, so the question here was, has anyone harmed or hurt you? This is an interesting response. We found 88% said no, but there was a still small fragment that said yes. Some specific responses included a predominance of answers relating to COVID-19. People felt hurt by friends and family over different opinions on COVID, discrimination based on vaccination status. Someone mentioned the divisiveness has been hard. Feelings hurt because of things said about masks or mandates, discriminations, seeing exclusion at church due to these things, and lost friendships due to differing views on COVID. Specific phrases were that other mentions about the government and especially on COVID. And finally, one person mentioned that they found nothing different. It was a normal everyday hurt from insensitive people. So unfortunately, there's that still that factor that people feel hurt by those around them. We have since responded to many of these individuals and asked them for if they need further support. Does anyone help you with your finances was the next question. And we found 87% said no, just over 12% said yes. And of those that said that they required some help, it was relating to financial planning or estate planning. And in terms of, is anyone using your financials for themselves? 97% said no, but of those small fragment that said yes, they would mention their children, maybe a family member or a sibling that was needing their assistance. One person mentioned that they host, Ukrainian families, and they assist them within their community. And in terms of, there's been an increase in reports of financial scams and fraud during COVID. Have you been a victim of financial scam or fraud? 92% said no, which is very good. And that thankfully that many people are not experiencing any type of financial scam or fraud. In terms of rating their own moods, we asked people in terms of a rating of 1 to 10, how do you feel? How would you rate your daily mood? We found that predominance of responses were at the 8 point or higher, which means they were very positive. Thank you so much. And if you do, were they able to, if they happen to be religious or spiritual, did they attend those activities during COVID? Over 51% said yes. And that was either through watching it online or having it available to them in some form or fashion. In terms of the question of, have you had any thoughts of leaving this world during COVID? This was also a very wide response. And I would encourage you, if you are interested in more analysis of this, we've got well over 5 pages of responses for this. And because so many people were varied in their response, we couldn't capture everyone today, but I wanted to include some of this, that specific responses mainly said no, but of those that said yes, there was a predominance of people who said that they pray often and that they obviously wait for the right time, that is God's time, or as they call the time that they will naturally pass. But oftentimes they found themselves getting closer to their belief in their God, and this was something that became a trend as well, we saw in this regard. And if they had any current thoughts of leaving this world, this was another question. And there was a slight increase by 1% that people said no. So during COVID, there was 1 degree less of this. People said yes versus no. So it's a very small difference. And in terms of being registered with an agency or business to help them with their personal needs, 91% said no, that they're not registered with another agency. But those that did say yes, these were some of the agencies that were shared with us. And I'll leave this to you as a separate slide, maybe for our resources on our resources tab. But the agencies that were listed were referred to as Paramed, Manatech, Cancer Clinic, Veterans Affairs, Seniors Home Support Program, an Attendant Service Program, which is a governmental agency, their doctors, or their Recovery College Canadian Mental Health and Awareness. Some mentioned the CMHA, which is the Canadian Mental Health Association. One person's mentioned Seniors of Stony Creek. Another mentioned Prairie Mountain Health. There was a large number of people who mentioned VON, the Victorian Order of Nurses, or St. Elizabeth's. Some mentioned Home Care, Interior Health, Home Health, Fraser Health, Voila, Paratransit, St. Elizabeth's, Meals on Wheels, Personal Support Workers, All-Inclusive Retirement Homes, and Service for Seniors. Others mentioned the CWL, the Knights Columbus, Bayshore, Interior Health BC, Diabetes Wellness, and Shoppers Drug Mart. And do you feel you have an adequate support system in your life? This question found the predominance of answers that many people said that they wish they had more contacts lists of adequate nursing homes, health agency contacts, any type of house cleaning, better trained PSWs, family doctors that are nearby, senior support in doing taxes, getting together with other seniors was a very popular answer. And that's good. Financial assistance. Some people mentioned they wanted help with their finances. Others were looking for job opportunities or assistance in managing their day-to-day life. Some said that they wanted mental health support and a contact list. So if any of you are interested in that, especially, we do have a wonderful contact in a resource center that we can refer you to for mental health support as well. And it's a wonderful referral base. So feel free to reach out to us for that. Others said they would like or appreciate a women's Bible study group, free or low cost housekeeping, transport assistance or a driver, more social interaction with seniors, better support from government, such as in pensions, exemptions, and WSIB, or disability access to veteran services. Further to that, others mentioned that they wanted information of free help to move, for example, items like furniture or heavy items, organization benefits, grocery delivery, activity programs for seniors, government funding for medications or treatments, stronger church connections, financial and estate planning, rides, as in transport to church or visits, and phoneless for seniors relating to quick emergencies such as flooding issues. One person mentioned they wanted information on organizations, PSW, respite, companionship, physio, and exercise. Others mentioned social interactions, snow removal, shoveling assistance. That was a popular answer. Or doctors being more available. Some mentioned social opportunities, wheelchair accessibility in general. They wanted more of that. And home care options for referrals to suitable organizations. So thank you. And so one thing I want to just take away here, and thank you all so much for being with us and sharing this results and the survey findings with us, is that people mentioned often that they wanted to stay positive and they wanted to remain active around one another, looking out for each other's needs. This is a very common theme we saw. One person, and this was stressed throughout the survey, that they want people to be loneliness to be addressed, perhaps an increase in faith sharing groups or hospitality groups, not only between seniors, but intergenerational, as everyone seems to have some feelings of emptiness sometimes. Seniors supporting seniors is so important. This also makes them feel they need it too. One person mentioned visiting shut-ins, so people who are isolated. Others said that senior groups such as church and in the community are very important. And it's important that younger people visit older people. And we should support seniors who don't have family nearby. So this is another phenomenon. Although we did see that there were cases of some abuse happening, and we've reached out to those people. Abuse was an issue among vulnerable elderly populations. Just, we know this happened before COVID, and the pandemic brought on more awareness of this issue. So as we know that there were many nursing homes and residence facilities that were taken over by government organizations or agencies, or even the military, we found that the survey responses expressed a concern about the state of Canada due to lockdowns and mandates during the pandemic, and seniors also expressed specific concerns about their health care and end-of-life care. Some seniors expressed fears specifically against COVID, or MAID, medical assistance in dying, or euthanasia. And as well as a theme arose of genuine concern for the well-being of others and the need to ensure individual human rights and freedoms are protected. One noteworthy response sums this all up in the final feedback, which is seeing seniors in person is the most important way to help them. So as we saw that there were ways to help, we created a list of ways that seniors felt that they could be assisted and better supported. And these are some of the things that we found. We've mentioned all of this throughout today's session, but I'll highlight this here as well. There's many needs for seniors, and it shows up in various ways, from health to home life to support and transportation. And it is very fragmented, so it's not the same for everyone. So some people just have specific instances they need. So it's very particular and very concrete. So we'd like to know from people what their needs are, and that's actually a very important point to take away. One of the survey's importance was summarized very well by a participant. They said that this was so special, a great experience and survey. I have not only shared what has been on my mind over the past 2 years, but what my heart has felt. And this is something we found that is very important, that we wanted to hear from people about their experience during COVID because they felt like they were not being heard. So this person shared that and said that the pandemic affected them. Thank you for caring to do this work. And it's important work, and they feel they had felt forgotten, but now they know they're being heard. So one of the points that we wanted to ensure that we raised after this is that there are many resources on elder abuse, and we needed to draw more awareness to elder abuse. There's different types. And so this is one thing that we've decided is to create a series on elder abuse awareness and prevention. We've just recently had a talk that we hosted just over a week ago on May 11th. This talk was recorded and it will be available. This was groundbreaking, I would say, to say the least. People walked away from the talk and said, I had never known this to happen. Some of the information that our two speakers shared, they're both RN nurses, and they've shared literally what happens on the ground with people in serving nursing homes across the board. One speaker, Kasha, she mentioned what happened in one senior residence that she used to work at, and actually shared about some of the conditions that she showed and what you need to look out for. If you have a loved one in a nursing home or in a long-term care facility, what are areas that you need to pay particular attention to ensure that they're not in harm's way. So these are just some of the signs of abuse, anything from physical abuse to emotional, spiritual, sexual, even things like being afraid of someone, financial fraud and exploitation. And some of these signs we actually wanted to ensure that people are aware of. So we created a very handy resource, and it's a little brochure. So you can pick up copies, or we can ship these out to you, and you can share them with others as well, that highlight some of these and how to get care and support and how to ultimately prevent and stop it. In terms of certain areas of advocacy, when it comes down to it, you want to ensure that this does not happen. And so, for example, prevention is key here. The only way to prevent this is ultimately to know about it. So when you find out that something is happening, you may want to intervene by speaking to the person that's affected. You may want to intervene with their family or ask them if they have spoken to their family already. We often see this, that they don't want to speak up for themselves. And this is an advocacy issue. So we need to encourage you to be advocates. And, we saw this from the last event in the last talk, that people found that this is occurring, they will speak up. But if you're not connected to someone, you have no ability to know what's happening in their life. So we encourage you to go out in your communities and be, visitors or volunteers, and maintain relationships with others so you know how to notice these issues when they happen and put an end to them. The issue. So one thing is what was mentioned was that you want to question housekeeping and maintenance frequency. So if someone is, being in a situation that their surroundings, their grounds are not being maintained well, there could be mold that's in the showers or in certain parts of their room or their residing areas, that you may want to bring that up. And that's a very important reporting issue. And you want to report any complaints to the director of care. If they're not resolved, properly, you may want to go further and seek out the Ministry of Long-Term Care. And of course, if you're unsure and you're not able to reach out to these members, you can reach out to us. And we have our helpline, like we mentioned, 1-855-675-8749. In this series, that's conducting a survey and making sure that people are aware of elder abuse issues, that they are, there's another series that's happening. There's 2 more sessions happening. One is next Thursday, May 25th from 12 to 1:30 with Hugh Scher. He's an experienced health, human rights, and constitutional rights lawyer. He will be sharing with us about what are issues that come up frequently for families and patients, and how you can help advocate for others and be a very good, effective person in their life, for them to be able to get over these issues and actually stop them. Another speaker that we have is on June 8th. From 12 to 1:30, Mary Scory. She's a prevention consultant from the Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario. She's going to share with us what constitutes elder abuse, how to recognize the risk factors and signs of abuse, and how to report it, and how best to support older adults experiencing or at risk of abuse. Ultimately, we see this here in CCC and throughout, that what is the solution is to be involved with people, to be connected, and to have that interpersonal connection. And that's part of the solution. So we ask ourselves, what can we do to stop this? The tide of loneliness, the effects of COVID and long COVID and all of the pandemic. Well, we need to grow in our awareness of our lonely members in our community. We need to reach out to them and to lighten their load. Some real ways to help is to visit, going out to being with and sharing time with the elderly in their homes. We encourage social interaction. There's tea groups, there's social groups, there's committees, and they can offer card games, and they can get together and be in community with one another. You can also invite people in your own street or in your neighborhood to senior events and other communities, such as faith groups and other special interest events. You could go for walks, encourage mobility. That's a huge factor and issue for many seniors, and we want to encourage that in a positive way. You can develop real friendships within your communities, and you can visit retirement residents. This is a picture of my son. I have 4 young kids, ages 5 and under, and my youngest is 1, and that's him in the corner here. His name is Tobias, and he went with my other 3 kids. One wasn't behaving, so he stayed back. And we visited a local seniors home in Peel, and it was lovely. We had a group of people, all different ages. They made little Easter paper lilies, and everyone had a great time. We're going back in June and celebrate with them again there. So anyone can do it. If you have kids or not kids, or you're retired, anyone has some time to visit, right? And reminding people that you're never alone, ultimately, that you are valued and that you care for one another. This is an important proactive approach. And this is ultimately what will take action to protect against the widening of MAID. And I will answer questions in just a minute. I'm just going to pop over this last couple screens here. So for those of you who do not know of this, we have a visiting program. And this is a book and resource that's made available to you. We have a full training, and it's being available online, so you can do it anywhere, anytime. There's recordings available, but you can also jump in. This is the My Story visiting program, which we ultimately help you gain the confidence to journey with those who are suffering. They're socially isolated, sick, dying, to renew their purpose in life and to offer them hope. The next training session is on June 6th and 7th with myself, and we co-host it with Alex Schattenberg of EPC. And this is ultimately a wonderful practical tool and method to help bring people to one another in their communities. You're expressing yourself with a guide. We offer this guide to you as a training manual. And then ultimately you're given this booklet, which is very handy. It's a workbook, which is filled with questions. And you are asked then to interview the person you meet with, which is a very fun and inviting experience. It's very heartwarming and thoughtful, and people appreciate this because they can create their own living legacies, and they can share it with other people in their community. If you're part of a group, you can gather all those stories together. One example, we just did this, and I'll show you that in a second, but it's a beautiful way to bring people back into a fold, into a community, especially if you're part of a group that wants to go back out into the community and bring those people in. So another tool we have and an asset is for you to learn the skills and confidence to be an advocate in the healthcare system. This is our training that's happens as well. And that's coming up on June 13th. It's only 2 hours, and it's again hosted by myself and Alex. And this is something we want to share with you, that these tools are here and available to you for free. And we help facilitate this so that you are able and given the tools to do this, to go out and do this important work. These are some beautiful pictures of people who've made the difference and made the difference. These are communities of women who participated in our story and shared their testimonies of their life. And we've gathered these stories, and there's a handy book. Thank you. It's called the My Story CWL. This is a wonderful group. It's her, we called it Her Story, and it's beautiful capture of over 50 women's stories across London and the Diocese of London. And they're beautiful, they're poignant, delightful stories, shared memories of their activity and their councils and how they were involved in their community and their church life. And so we encourage you to take a copy. Today we'll have some available here in person and for those who are here. And we'll also encourage you to share this with your own groups and your own ministries and your own organizations, because these are the ways that we change the communities around us and ultimately bring people to hope. And finally, I just want to leave off here that we are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have our helpline, which is here listed for you. It's free and confidential. We encourage you to, reach out to us if you ever find yourself in need. And, we thank you for your support. All of you who are here today and in person, thank you for being here. And online, we greatly appreciate you. This will be recorded, so you'll have a chance to review it if you need to. And the reports, like I mentioned, are available. And so all of this is done because of the generosity of donors who are dedicated members of our organization across Canada. And we definitely appreciate your support. So if you feel you're able to support us, we want to hear from you. Feel free to reach out to us. You can donate as well if you can. We'd greatly appreciate it. All these resources are free so that people are not limited by finance or their social economic situation. And for everyone who's on, thank you all. Again, please ensure that we have your email addresses if you haven't already. And we'll look forward to keep in touch with you. Please stay in touch with us. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.